our standards. So that's something we're thinking.
Right, Philip, then Wayne.
Well, on the face of it, I mean, changing the existing use of the site to housing is an attractive notion because it's quite unsightly. But then you look into what has been proposed. I'm very unhappy about the affordable housing. As past chairman of the affordable housing group, I know some of the difficulties of trying to make the Bible, the numbers work. And I have to accept, I've read the report that's been produced by the independent consultant, and I have to accept that is, you know, that is as it is, and it's not bad. But the parking really concerns me. These are going to be very expensive dwellings. They're going to have 2 cars per dwelling without doubt. They're not going to be catching the bus on the corner to go to the shops in Twyford, which is the sort of closest shop. And you just don't have enough space. And where are people going to park? People tell me it's impossible to park in Broadway in the evening, and I just think it fails on that and that line.
Well, I'll just come back before going to so we've got a parking policy. This beats the parking policy.
Well, but you can't be bound by the parking policy. A policy that was designed for development like Hatch Farm and what have you. It wasn't developed for the tiny little corner in busy town centres. We have to sort of use our common sense.
Sorry, Chair. Can I just add something to those points? There is actually an over provision of parking which is set out in paragraph 35 of my report. So they're not just meeting the standards, they're exceeding them. I understand the concerns, but you could get absolutely nowhere trying to make that argument, I think, unfortunately. Just coming back to the affordable housing issue, one thing I forgot to mention as well is that there was a previous application which did have an extra unit on, so it was 11 units in total. And with that scheme, the applicant wasn't making any arguments with viability at all because of the additional income from that unit. So they have tried to provide affordable housing previously, but they took that unit off on the back of our recommendation. It was an overdevelopment site, essentially. So it just to advise members, it's not the case they've just come in cold and just said no, we're not going to provide it. In effect, it's been sort of brought about because you know, we felt it was an overdevelopment of the site, the previous scheme.
Wayne, then Michelle.
Yeah, you've answered quite a few of my questions, but just clarity. Somebody mentioned 11. It's 10 properties, 22 bedrooms, and 17 spaces. If you add up the spaces that you've got, and I've done it twice, they add up to 19 if you exclude between the major building and the major block of flats. Now go that way, Chris. So they're not. So they're not parking.
Those 2 are spaces.
Okay, all right. So that confirms then it is 17. I think you've got a unique problem here. Although I am a member for Hurst, I live in the parish of Wargrave. And if you ever try and I do agree with you, Philip, if you try to park anywhere, even if you fancy going out to drink or eat in the evening in Wargrave, even in the car park that's off School Road, it's near on impossible. Now with developments, although we don't like it, they park on the curbs, they park on the grass, etc., but they do get around it. You can't get around it here, because if any of you go down that road in the evening, not during the day, although it's still difficult in the day, the existing site, the cars are in the compound at night, they're not using the facilities of the road. Most of those houses along there have nowhere to park, so they go up into the village of Wargrave. You can't park up that hill. You've got a few spaces just alongside, there's like a little cut through just as you go towards Henley. On the right hand side there's some spaces there. I think we've got a unique problem. I absolutely I can't argue they meet the standard, but this is a unique problem that we've got in front of us. Now, the other one I'd like to bring out is a bit of a stretch of the imagination on page 135, the item 35, where it says, and I'll read it out. Furthermore, the site is located within a sustainable location and the future occupiers will be able to access local facilities. Now, by that you mean a pub or a takeaway or a restaurant, because there's no local facilities. And the service without the reliance on a motor car. Well, if you're going to walk to Victoria Road, post office or the convenience store, that's some way off. And it has a bus stop. I mean, have you seen the frequency of the buses that go to Headley or go to High Wycombe or go to Twyford? That is a real stretch of the imagination. I think we're coming together of quite a number of things here that I'm not suggesting for 1 minute that the pictures you show, you're absolutely right. From the face of it, it makes it a much more attractive site than what's there now. I just really worry that we've got a unique position. I know we've got a standard, but it just worries me that we're creating a bigger problem, and it's going to be the problem for the residents of Walgrave.
I don't know if Chris wants to come back on some of the parking points, but just regarding the sustainability issue, it's not my imagination, it's our policy. The site is within a modest development location, and as I said, it recognises that with modest development locations that they're not as sustainable as places like Wokingham and Twyford and other sort of larger areas. But our policy is that this is a sustainable location, and that's the issue. That's what this application has to be assessed against. That's what an inspector will look at, and that's what developers will look at. So with regard to its location of where it is deemed a sustainable location in accordance with the development plan.
Okay, Chris, come on in.
I haven't really got anything additional to add, unfortunately. I understand the point
You
you
get my
make.
point.
Yeah, no, I understand the point you make. And obviously the calculator that we have, obviously you do it by area, so it's not blanket across, you pick the part of the borough, and obviously it helps to obviously assign.
Yeah, I get it. We've got a unique problem here.
Right, Michelle.
I also deplore the lack of affordable homes. Affordable homes in that area are in great demand and absolutely no supply, and WHL isn't building any either up in that area. So I don't know where the children of the local people are going to do unless they're very rich and they can buy other new homes. But I parked up the hill there. It was a challenge. I've lived in places with hills on them. I know how to park on the hills. But I can't imagine a whole bunch of people parking on those hills without forgetting their brakes on and having their cars roll down the hill. I also think about sustainability and the ability to provide affordable homes, and the idea that some of the suppositions and some of the assumptions and some of the rules from the NPPF I think are out of keeping with reality in today's land. And if you've tried to buy a home lately, it's impossible.
Thank you, Michelle. Bill?
Thank you. Yeah, going back to accessibility to the two houses up on Walgrave Hill. You said that the situation really wouldn't be any different to what it is already. I don't disagree, but surely we should be looking at improving the situation. It's not good. I mean, if you go back enough years, people didn't have refuse carts going up there, might have threw it out the window. We now need to look at improving a situation rather than just leaving it the same, which is going to cause a problem.
Sorry.
Yeah, specifically.
Yeah, that's it. Sorry, yeah, just to check, because it was the colleague who might have dealt with the application, so I just want to check what the rear access initially had access to. I understand now it was just that existing unit. And on the facts that obviously he's looked at it and obviously advised me to bring it tonight, is that from what he's looked at, the additional, we have many places that kind of split a unit into two, and for example, some units under PD can obviously convert to flats or whatever they may do, and as such, that it's not intensive, it doesn't create a great deal of issue. And the existing junction with Walgrave Hill, obviously if the vegetation and stuff is overgrown, then obviously part of that is public highway, which obviously we need to make sure that it is maintained to the use that it is used at. So in Parliament, there's something there in terms of maintenance that we need to have a look at.
Yeah, I mean, I don't know the situation when the refuse vehicle arrives, but I can imagine that somebody trying to use Walgrave Hill might find it a little bit difficult. And all I'm saying is that when you've got a situation you're rebuilding and you're relaying, then's the time to look to improve it rather than just having the status quo.
Yeah, I don't necessarily disagree. When I look at the top, the only change they're making is by providing that extra unit, in terms of it's a public right of way that runs along as you come off of the Walgrave Hill. And the refuse truckers, they will be picking up from the 5 units already at the top, but it's just that one extra bin, bag or wheelie bin, whatever it is, that's in Walgrave.
So members do need to remember we have to look at an application that is in front of us. We can't start redesigning it and say what we would like to do. So as long as it doesn't make the situation worse, then we have to accept it. John?
I think I agree with Wayne. It meets our standards, and the standards have been drawn up to take into consideration the majority of locations. This is a pretty unique location. If you look at the track's not much more than an old drover's road. It comes straight out onto the main road. I would suggest that the sight lines coming onto that main road are very poor. The other thing is that you talk about sustainable. I'm finding it hard to find it sustainable. Where's the nearest school? Where's the nearest shops? And the number of cars that are going to be used, and I think everybody's right about this, they're not going to be waiting an hour and a half, 2 hours for a bus. They're going to be using their cars. Now, normally, I agree with you, Chris, when you say that people can change their house and quite often do change their houses into flats. But in most cases, those houses have a garden, a front garden, or they tend to be in a residential area where there is some parking. There is absolutely no parking outside this site in Walgrave. Absolutely none at all. And I just feel that our standards, to approve it on our standards would be correct, but I do believe that this is quite a unique location. I don't know if you've been to the site and you've looked at the site. It's right on the corner. As I say, and the almshouses at the end of the track, and the track is truly a track. Nobody's referring to it as anything else. And we're probably going to see at least an additional 4, maybe even 5 vehicles going down that track every day, going to work, coming home. It's a very, very unique. Now, I believe applying our normal standards to this is wrong.
I think, just trying to pick, so the point, the issue you really have is the rear, the track itself, because obviously there's only one additional unit serving that track. In terms of visibility, it is what it is. It is a kind of an existing track, as you say, where it adjoins the highway. You are obviously coming down a slope onto joining Walgrave Hill. And as such, you are slightly at a higher height. Your visibility is slightly improved, albeit it's not exactly where perhaps we want it to be. But I think we just bring it back to the fact that it is just it's one extra, and there is no, from what we've reviewed, there is no significant impact from that additional 1 unit.
Is there not 2 units there?
One there already.
It's already existing, so it's just one.
There's going to be 2 units there. 2 units, which will probably mean somebody and their partner. So you're going to have 4 cars going in and out of there every single day. I just don't, looking at that track, I just don't see how that forms part of a sustainable development. It's on a blind bend as well.
Well, the bend is further up down the corner. It's not directly adjacent to it.
It's not far away.
No, I agree, it may not be far away, but in terms of, Wargrave Hill itself, sorry. Wargrave Hill itself is, the national speed limit starts further up the hill. It's in the section which is reduced to 30. It's there down the hill section. You come into that part of the village. You come around the corner. The corner itself acts as kind of a speed constraint measure. Manual Streets allows obviously to look at those features and take into account what visibility can and can't be. I think in terms of what we've got, we're happy with what's proposed.
I would suggest that when we drew up our when we drew up our guidance, and when we that this site was never envisaged. We never envisaged a site like this.
Malcolm.
Thank you. I have a number of concerns here. Parking should be one of them, obviously. The thing is, it's open plan parking as well. They're not garages, are they? They're open areas. And if you're in an area where there is no inadequate parking generally, people will tend to go into the nearest open space they think they can park because they're only going to be 20 minutes or half an hour. So it could well be that parking is not dedicated adequately for the residents anyway, and they come home and can't even get in their own area. The second problem, because it's open plan parking, there are no garages there, and garages provide a secondary benefit of storage. People sometimes park their cars or they use storage. So unless there's adequate facilities within the dwellings themselves for storage, that will make an issue, and they can't put it anywhere. There's no doubt at all about the appearance. It would look better with this sort of thing rather than the scrappy sort of garage appearance at the moment. However, that's not what we're supposed to be dealing with, really. The fact is, that corner and that road, they're narrow, it's on a bend. When I stood there on Friday, and imagine trying to go out into that road when cars come round the bend. It's not an easy one, and to have that number of cars parked going in and out on that bend, which is a low visibility one, that's not too impressive. Sustainability generally, we've already discussed that if anybody wants to go anywhere, whether schools or shops or whatever, they're going to have to drive. So it's not going to be a massive local pop down the shops around the corner one. People are going to have to get in their cars. And also there is no affordable housing there, which is another concern. So basically several parking issues, storage issues for the people because they don't have a garage, and no affordability. Also, final point made by someone else, which is that they're saying that's what they're doing at the moment, they're coping. We are supposed to be trying to get something that's hopefully better for new development rather than we're barely matching what is there at the moment.
I can't comment about storage internally, but I think given the parking comments you made, I'm obviously just adding garages to the mix in this instance. But I think the report sets out the parking. I can be kind of a worst case is what they could apply based on the figures they've got. Just to give an example, because they are only 2-bedroom units, there are some 2 that are 3-bedroom, but it goes on habitable rooms. They could actually just have all of it unallocated, which would only require 12 parking spaces. So in essence, they're providing 5 additional spaces than what generally required. The access from Wargrave Hill with the high street visibility, I mean, you can probably when you were on site, you saw the highway boundary was pulled back. Visibility on there, as far as we're concerned, is acceptable. It's existing and it meets the current standards. And the benefits are that obviously the access that currently exists to the garage will be located further away from that junction, meaning that obviously there's less people potentially can fit into those turns.
So just to add to the space and storage, it does meet the space standard guidance, and there is separate cycle and bin storage for all the properties.
Can you just remind me which document you referred to where the councillors have said that Wargrave is a sustainable location?
It's in the core strategy and it's also in our MDD local plan. It sets out, I guess you could consider it 4 different categories. You have major development locations, modest development locations, which this is, and limited development locations. And outside that, of course, you have countryside. This is a modest development location, and any inspector or any decision maker will look at the development plan as the starting point and see that where it is, and if it's within a settlement boundary, and as it is here in a modest development location. I've never ever come across a case where an inspector or anyone has considered an application in a settlement boundary and said it's unsustainable.
I'm just trying to come back on and say one more point that I did right at the beginning when I was talking about the loss of employment, and you commented that we do have a need for houses. I thought we had a 5-year land supply, so I'm struggling to understand why we do have a need for the houses and we can afford to lose all this employment.
You are very correct, yes, we do have a 5-year housing land supply. It is almost a secondary point really to the main points of what I was saying, is that when an inspector weighs this up, they will have to weigh up the loss of employment with the benefit of more residential dwellings. In my view, like I say, that would be a secondary point, but I do feel there will still be benefits in additional residential units.
Okay. John, you have one more?
Yeah, just one more. I mean, so I know we're not supposed to redesign planning applications, and I'm not going to, but I would actually ask if they didn't have to buy the residential property behind at the higher value, would that mean it would become more viable and they could actually put some affordable housing in? Because that's my concern.
I can't really answer that.
No, you can't, but when working with them, you know, when working with these people, I mean, to me it looks like overdevelopment of this site, to be quite candid with you. Having been on site, seen what the site looks like, I think that the 2 out the back are just done. I think the front bit works well, and what I'm seeing, but I just think the rear of the property is overdeveloped.
So I just to come back on one point. The redevelopment of the bungalow, or the removal of it, is integral. Which, if you look at the boundary here to where the flat is, that bungalow probably sits about here. So it's not the fact that you would be able to. I don't think. Oh well, actually, I know for a fact you wouldn't be able to, because I think the wall to the existing garage sort of comes across here probably. So you wouldn't be able to do it without the bungalow coming forward.
Okay, Michelle, to wind up.
I don't like the fact that the developer or an agent hasn't shown up for representing this thing. I think they should have been here.
Sorry, it's just one question. I mean, I must admit, I'm somewhat surprised. I mean, when looking at the plots, we are talking about, can I just, what are we talking about, total number on here? Again, was it 11?
10. No, it's 10 units.
10, and they are 2-bedroom?
Yes, there'll be 6 2-bedroom houses, 2 2-bedroom flats and 2 3-bedroom flats.
It's just that I'm looking at the plots at the rear of them. We wouldn't normally expect to see a plot that size on properties of that size, would we?
So which part are you referring to?
The gardens.
Well, they meet our standards of, in terms of being 11 metres deep.
But you see, again, it's an urban environment, this, isn't it? We would not expect, if they were building flats and houses in the town centre, we wouldn't expect an 11-metre garden, would we?
It is our minimum requirement, so there is that our SPD states quite categorically it is a minimum requirement. There is a proviso in it saying in high density areas that there may be provision to reduce them, but in terms of where this site is located, it's not in an area where houses generally have less than 11 metre gardens. They usually have, if you look at sort of 9 the High Street next to it, that has actually quite a sort of generous garden. So I think it would be tricky to say this is a site where they should deliver sort of smaller gardens.
Okay.
Well, before we go to vote then, there's also meant a condition about no construction traffic along the track. Is that already in there or not?
There is a condition asking for a method of construction statement, and I think it'd be very obvious that that would all have to come via the high streets. You wouldn't be able to get a construction vehicle to the rear, no.
So when we say obvious, does that mean it definitely won't be using the track?
It's not definite, but with a method of construction statement, it will only be signed off if it is acceptable from a highway safety perspective.
Right, I think members would like to see it as a condition. Am I right that they're not to use it?
I don't think that would be a problem adding that as a specific condition. Certainly shouldn't use the track to the rear. I don't see a problem with that, no.
Okay. Right, if members are all done, I'm going to take it to the vote then. So there's the recommendation set out on page 120 with the conditions and the informatives, and then there's on the update there is an additional condition, and then the condition that I've just mentioned about construction traffic. So all those in favour please show. So we have 2 in favour, and those against? 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 against, and I'm thinking 1 abstention.
I'm abstaining because it meets our guidelines, but I just feel it's inappropriate in that location.
Okay. Right, as that's fallen, we do need another recommendation. So who would like to suggest reasons for refusal? Okay, what else? Can we have the speaker, please?
Yeah, sorry. I'm going to have to be careful here because I remember asking you on the visit, Mark, what the density was, and you said that we've got some parts of the High Street at 90. Is that right?
Yeah, the terracing properties, as you're going into Walgrave from
On the left? From
yeah,
the left.
on the right there's a terrace, yeah.
So, overdevelopment, I think we're going to have to, I mean, and I'm looking at you, Mark, if we say overdevelopment, but we've got a unique issue here with, although we're saying it meets our our parking standards, but we've got a unique issue here with regards to the parking arrangements in the surrounding areas, and thereby the fact of the overdevelopment, it will create a unique problem. But
Mark, would you like to?
I guess I'm struggling a little bit, as you are, because it is you really taking it down to just a common sense approach about, I mean, is it a practical layout? And so you could say that it's a cramped and contrived parking layout that fits in with the area. I'm struggling to give you any more than that.
no, because you see, the classic is street scene, but it actually it improves the street scene. Layout, absolutely. I mean, layout of the parking in conjunction with the plot, and then bringing in John's point around the best use of the plot, overall creating overdevelopment of the site. But it's
The fact is, without the 2 houses, without the 2 houses, I think I would have been quite happy to go with the proposal. The 2 houses were there. It's the access and accessibility to those 2 houses at the top that is the concern.
Remember at the top, it's only adding 1 house.
One extra.
One
yeah,
extra.
Yeah, but I think it's still going to create problems.
Would legal like to offer anything, or?
If members are minded to refuse this application, of course we will need a proposal and a seconder, and we'll also need reasons for refusal, because if it was to go to appeal, there will need to be something justifying the decision that was made by the committee. Also, I think any inspector would look at our standards, just as our officers have when considering this application, So that's something to bear in mind when considering how to finalise this application.
I think due to the unique...
Hold on, Philip was going to say something first and then...
Standards are standards when they were designed for this type of situation. And, you know, we're supposed to use our heads here, not just follow blindly standards that were laid down for, I know you're shaking your head and saying, well, it's not planning, but I mean, you would be putting people, allowing houses to be sold, which are unworkable with the park.
Thank you, Philip. John?
I'll refer to Malcolm because he was going to use...
Due to the uniqueness of the location and its dependency on cars, we think it's the ratio of parking to the dwellings is inadequate. We're along those lines.
I was going to say, due to the unique nature of the site, I believe it's overdeveloped.
I think if we could have uniqueness of the site, overdevelopment and the unsustainable nature, because as we've said, we all agree, well I think a lot of us agree, that you would need a motor car in order to survive in that location. Yeah. But I do absolutely accept that we've got broad brush standards that, you know, don't help us in this unique situation.
I think I would add, I think as Mark mentioned at the beginning, the reason this one has come to committee, other than being called in, is the fact that it's classed as a major, so it would have come anyway, because it is 10 units. And therefore the standards, they're not broad brush, they are there for everything. We would use our parking standards for a site of this size. Yeah. We'd use it for smaller, but it's 10 units, it's not just a small 1 or 2 house scheme.
Does not the geography of the area matter?
Unique location.
Unique location and the geography of the area is surely critical to how you can use that space.
Well, could you use the fact that it is a unique conservation area?
No, I don't think so. Because
I think maybe to help members, when you talk about overdevelopment, it would be good to qualify what you mean by that. I think listening to the debates, you seem to be saying overdevelopment in terms of insufficient parking. Is that correct?
And it's layered, yeah.
Okay. With regard to uniqueness as well, you just mentioned that, yeah, you need to qualify what you mean by uniqueness. So I'm not sure the facts in the conservation area would necessarily qualify for that. With regard to sustainability, I would strongly suggest to leave that word out. Perhaps a better way of this would be lack of nearby facilities and services, but as mentioned, it is within a settlement boundary.
Sorry, yeah, Mark, I absolutely agree. My uniqueness point is, as I've said, we've seen lots of applications come through this evening, and there seems to be a theme here, and we apply the standards, but in a lot of these areas, and we've all got them, people find places to park, whether they park on the grass, whether they park on the curbs, whether they park all sorts of places. You only need to go through a lot of the estates that are being built now to see that happen. Here, they physically haven't got anywhere to go, and that was my point around uniqueness. But it comes back to
just to remind us where we are, you had the recommendation to approve, and that's now not been taken, so you need a reason for refusal and then vote on it, or you can defer it and tell us to take it back to the applicant. I'm not 100% clear what we'd be negotiating if we took it back to the applicant, other than trying to get a more sensible,
less congested site, presumably, with a bit more space for parking.
I'm still trying to speak. A more sensible layout. So you either need to come up with a reason for refusal. The guidance you've been given is it could be related to the cramped and congested nature of the car parking in the front of the site, and that not being practical. Or you can need to defer to get the applicant to modify it to make the car parking more legible and more manoeuvrable. Those are the options.
Right, members, you've heard those options, and I'm not hearing some clear reasons why we think it should be reduced, that we think are going to stand up at appeal. So I personally would think that what Mark has just suggested about deferring to the applicant would be a way forward. Thoughts?
Yeah, I agree, and I wonder, do we have to apply the garden standards in this set of circumstances with flats? I didn't think we had. I mean, we're sticking up flats in Reading Road in Winnish all the time, and they don't stop meter gardens.
This is a really difficult application, and clearly you have options. We've already had to accept that affordable housing can go to make the scheme viable. The other guidance issues that we would normally follow in terms of garden depths can be compromised, provided that in the balance it's acceptable. And I think what you're saying, if you are saying to reduce other standards, you're saying that you would prioritise the parking issues above private residential amenity. And if that were the instruction, we could take that back to the applicant to see if they're willing to move on that.
Angus, sorry.
Just, we talked about viability earlier. If we did go back to the applicant, there would be some discussion. Obviously, one of the things that is making this site potentially unviable is the degree of contamination on the site. But that's not specified at this point. Would there be an opportunity for some more checking of the degree of contamination, or the better estimate of the cost of cleaning the site, which would clarify at least that part of the application?
In terms of the viability report, there's a cost per square metre which they've used, and that's based on evidence that they've got at the moment. In terms of the viability issue, I think the main issue is the existing use value. That would be the sort of principal issue in terms of that. I don't think it's going to make too much difference if they do more site surveys with regards to contamination in terms of viability. I think the principal issue with brownfield sites is the existing use value. Just going back to some of the comments previously, I mean, if parking was the principal issue or the only issue which the committee were concerned about, then perhaps that is something we can go back to the applicant on, knowing that's the only issue and that's something that can be looked at, because there may be ways to get additional spaces on there. So if that's the only issue, it could be possible to defer that and go back to the applicant. There is actually, I think, still about 3 or 4 weeks to go with this application, so there is still time to negotiate that, but we'd have to have a very clear steer that that was the only concern.
Members, is it our only concern?
Parking and layout.
So Malcolm first.
Correct. It's a combination of the parking and the layout of the site, so that we could make maybe the exit a different place, so it wouldn't be so obvious coming out on that corner. It's not having to redesign it, just in a combination of parking and layout to make it more suitable without getting out onto the narrow road, and reduce the likelihood of passers-by effectively going into open parking there.
So you've been the two houses at the back?
Well, I didn't want to be too specific. It's down to them to see what they can do. Maybe if they took, I don't know, one house off it and increase the park and reduce the gardens, they could do something quite substantial with it. It's a redesign.
Did you want to say something, Michelle?
I would also like to see an affordable home there, at least one.
That's not.
I know that, but I still would like to see that would be more. I know that, but
Wayne,
could we just build on Mark's point? I agree, if it's the only point that Mark's taken back, and we all agree that parking is the biggest issue, just looking at this, I don't know if you were thinking, Mark, but if you look, could you just point out on that above you, Chris, where you've got, yeah, exactly there. So the space above that duplex unit, that area there, I understand where the house is, you know, and there's certain standards on the houses, and compared to the other areas, the other houses in the road, you can see they've got massive buildings. Is there any way that that could be shifted back into the plot, which creates more parking around the front, and thereby reduces the reliance on the roads of Walgrave? Just
I think we've got the picture to ask us to take it back to the applicant and look at the layout of the parking area to see if there was more space, and Philip's suggestion of relaxing the amenity standards a little bit to try to make it fit, because at the end of the day it is a difficult call. It's, you know, it's a commercial site, and the viability issues are to a high degree driving it. I think from an amenity point of view it's much better in the conservation area, although we have to balance that against the loss of the business. So there are pluses and minuses the whole way around.
Sorry. You could even, I think, if you did go back to the applicant looking at that, and I mean, for those of us that were on the site visit, there's some quite interesting levels here. But you could even consider just having the one access, not the back access, but I know that's bringing a completely different elevation into the equation, but that is a possibility, because I look at that and I think you've got a lot of wasted space up the top where you've got those parking spaces. You've got area there. I am absolutely sure you could redesign that, get rid of that access coming in, have the one down the bottom, and then you will help the situation. But I know we should be redesigning.
So do we have to give an indication of how many parking spaces we
come in here. Get rid of that. Come in here. Shift that down there.
I don't think the committee needs to be prescriptive. I think it's a matter for the applicant to listen to the issues that have been raised, and we'll take it away and see if they can address your concerns in a broad sense.
So what is the next process? What do I have to do now for the committee? Just take it to the vote?
Someone needs to.
Who would like to move this?
So I'm prepared. Sorry. Am I, Mark, proposing a deferment and allow Mark to look at the layout with the applicant? Yep. So I propose that.
You need a second.
I need a seconder.
I'll second that.
Oh, Philip will second it, thank you. Right, we can now go to the vote on that then. So all those in favour, please show. And that is unanimous. Thank you, members. I think it was good that you were late, John, so this was the last application. As other people would have sort of sat through a very long discussion, so thank you very much.